Excellent. Good afternoon. Now that I think it's afternoon for most of us, it is time for our last seminar of the day. And I have the pleasure to introduce to you today the Reverend Dr. Brenda Girton-Mitchell. She is the president of Grace and Race Ministries and is also Grace and Race Ministries, and she specializes in providing assistance to nonprofit businesses and government organizations in her other daily life in Girton-Mitchell Associates. She's a very busy woman. She is also the co-chair of the Act Now to End Racism Task Force for the National Council of Churches of Christ in the USA. So she is here to talk to us about that today. And you can read the rest of her bio, which is long and very interesting. She has quite the career, you can find it underneath the video here. If you scroll down just a little bit, you can read more of her bio. So as I said, today she is here to talk about the Act Now to End Racism campaign that the National Council of Churches is providing all kinds of resources and things. So to start us off, I would love for you all to be able to watch with me. She has suggested that we watch this video from that website at the National Council of Churches. So here is a little introduction for you.
We are tired of our children being hashtags. Hashtag Trayvon Martin, hashtag Tamir Rice, hashtag Sandra Bland, hashtag Freddie Gray, hashtag Rika Boyd, hashtag Michael Brown, hashtag John Crawford. And when I look at my son and my grandson, I pray 50 years from now, Kevin, I pledge to you as your grandfather that 50 years from now, you'll be able to stand and not be judged by the color of your skin. Kevin, I speak into your life. You shall live and not die. Kevin, we will work together, pray together, live together, love together, because racism in 2018 has met its match. Look at us together on one accord. So walk together, children. Pray together, children. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. God bless you. There's a brighter day. And now, unto him who is able. Do you believe he's able? Now, unto him who is able to keep you from falling and present you faultless, without race, without denomination, present you faultless before his presence with exceeding great joy. To the only wise God be glory, be majesty, be dominion.
Everybody say amen, amen, amen. I did that more for my soul perhaps than for yours. Good afternoon. I am delighted to have the opportunity to share with you today in the National Workshop on Christian Unity. And I don't know what the mechanisms are on your machine, but if you can wave your hand or clap, if you were present with us in 2018, show some sign. And then we say we're 3 years after that major declaration that we were going to awaken, confront, and transform our churches, ourselves, our communities to be voices that help end racism, to recognize that the church has a unique responsibility for helping people to understand the issues, giving people tools, empowering people to work together in new and different ways, recognizing the Spirit of God in each of us, and knowing that God will meet us at our point of need in this work. And so I wanted to start with that little clip just to remind us that this is a long journey. 3 years feels like a long time because we're in the pandemic, but 3 years ago we said, having worked up to that moment, having worked from the Truth and Reconciliation working group, having decided that we would have an advisory council, having decided that it was time to make this an integrated part of the work of the National Council of Churches. 3 years ago, we said we were tired of the racism that was showing in our systems, that we needed as people of faith to work together, to not just become awakened or aware of what was going on, but to find a way to confront the ills in our society, recognizing that there were systemic issues, and then to work for and lean into transformation, knowing that we'd be in this work for years to come. And to hear Bishop Morris say, and most of you remember that that was the 50th anniversary date, celebration date of the death of Dr. King on April 4th in 2018. And so 3 years later, the question today is, what does it mean? What have we done? And where are we going? So Tura asked that I would just kind of give an update on that work, because sometimes we have these grand projects and they become archival work and you don't really see the steps that have been taken, the gains that have been made. And I also think that as believers, very often we do kind of put our light under a bushel. We don't celebrate even the small gains, the steps forward. And that's shame on us, because sometimes we have to, pat ourselves on the back, encourage ourselves to keep going because it's hard work. And so if there's anything I strive to do in ministry, is to be an encourager. And in this work, everybody has to be encouraged to stay together. So I'm going to ask Tura if just for a moment, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we'll go back to that NCC website. And I just want to show you where you can keep up with some of the history of what's going on and some of the current activities that are taking place under Act Now. We've now become officially the Racial Justice Task Force of the National Council of Churches. And if we go to the link that simply says Act Now, you will see there some of the resources. We looked at the clip that was the movement, and now we're a part of the launch, and now we're at Antiracism resources. Absolutely. So this will give you the context for why we made the call, and that action is still, I love the acronym, Act Now in this moment. I said to Tura the other day, the Dr. King expression that's always hovering in my spirit is, where do we go from here? And here keeps changing. But wherever here is, we've got to do something, act in the present moment to meet the need of the hour if we're going to truly be agents of change. And we know that even just listen to him 3 years ago with his grandson, and that grandson must have heard granddaddy yelling a whole lot of times because he didn't even blink, did he? But even then he was saying 50 years from now, Kevin. And we're thinking about what can we do right now that may change, improve conditions for an era when we won't even be on this side. We won't even be alive, but we have a responsibility for investing in the future to act. And so some of the steps that are being taken to help us, and she mentions Reverend Dr. Andrea Alexander is the staff person at NCC that's responsible for this area of justice and advocacy, that some of the key work, it's still happening around HR 40 that aligns the National Council of Churches with the anti-racism campaign and the move for reparations, the United Against Churches for Change, United Against Racism Churches for Change. There's a facilitator's guide on the website. And then these are some of the expressions that our churches have shared with us of things that they're doing as they look at their work through an anti-racism lens or a racial justice lens. And so if you're denomination, your congregation is not listed, and you want to make sure that NCC has a list of your resources, your availability to share in this space, please feel free to send those to info@nccusa.org. And we thank you for sharing, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from one another, and there are always opportunities to collaborate in this space. Every time I pick up the newspaper or turn on CNN, which I'm trying not to do a whole lot these days, I am reminded that we're in a fight for the soul of our nation, as John Lewis said. And sometimes the fight feels so big, so massive, that my human reaction is to just turn off the TV, not watch it, don't read the newspaper, go to bed and watch a sitcom. But we know in our spiritual world, there are things that God calls us to do. And we're supposed to be part of the solution to the problem. And I think that's why this conversation today is an extremely important one, because it reminds us that we're not in it by ourselves. We have a higher calling to do this work. We don't have to have all of the answers, but there's something each one of us can do. And I sometimes frustrate my own efforts of thinking, my contribution is so small in this great, big, massive area of concern. But if everybody does their little bitty piece in this great, big, massive area of concern, we will experience change. It has to become very personal to us as individuals, and personal to us in our communities, in our families, in our churches. So I want us to spend just a little while this afternoon. We're going to be in breakout groups just for a few moments, and I want to address 3 questions, and you can pick the one or two or all 3, or you might say, I don't like any of Reverend Brenda's questions, and you make up your own. But we're going to give you an opportunity to respond back. So when you think about where do we go from here, when you think about what it means to act now through the lens of racial justice, what's your denomination doing, planning to do, has done? You might say nothing. Or what are you doing for the last 3 years? What kind of change or investment in the future have you made, or your congregation made, or your denomination made? And then the third one is, what do you need that helps you get engaged or stay engaged? What kind of partners do you have, or what kind of partners do you need? So you're going to be in groups of about 4 or 5. You'll have just about 10 minutes, so you won't get to preach a sermon, but you can share a little bit. And then we'll ask just a few of the groups to report back if there are things that you want to share with the whole, what we can do better together to show that we're really acting now, that we're serious about this commitment to become anti-racist, to look at the systems that are even impacted in our churches, to address things that we used to say we shouldn't talk about. You don't talk about religion and politics, and now we have to talk about them both. You don't talk about race, well, we better talk about it, because all of those are real issues in our lives. And we create brave spaces, not necessarily feeling safe. Sometimes we're going to stick our foot in our mouth. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes that we catch. Sometimes we may hurt somebody unintendedly. It's hard work, but iron sharpens iron. And you can't do that without some sparks flying. So you got to be willing to engage with some of the tough issues. So with the few moments we have, just let's talk about in the last 3 years, you might say the last 3 weeks, what you, your denomination, your church, any one of those, your family has done to be active in this space of being awakened, of confronting the issue, and working toward transformation. So tour, whoever our tour guide is, we'll go into our rooms for about 10 minutes.
All right, I've got everything set up.
We had about 15 groups, so we won't get a report from each group, but there's somebody in a group that says, oh, I just got the big group just has to hear this idea or this opportunity or this ask. And we're going to take first come, first serve. So if you raise your hand or put in the chat that you'd like to be recognized to say something on behalf of your group rather than be volunteered, then please do that. And I cannot see the whole screen, so David, you'll have to help me.
Yeah. Is anybody, I don't have a full,
Okay.
is Tura can help us out. She's like looking at it on 2 monitors. So let us know if anybody raises their hand.
I am. James Gilroy, you've got your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Tura. No, we had
seconds in the sun.
Thank you, Brenda. We had a group of 5, 2 very young pastors that I was extremely impressed with, just the courage of what they've done, with the short time that they've been pastors, in terms of in predominantly white communities as well, and some of the backlash they've received and whatever, and how they've really maintained a wonderful stance in context of racial equity and integrity in what they're attempting to do. So I think we didn't have enough time to continue on our discussion, but I was impressed with their courage and their real Christian commitment, to equality.
Okay, I've got you on the hot spot. So let me ask, can you give an example of one of the things that they said they were able to do?
Well, one was working predominantly white, parish or community in New Jersey. Just the homilies, the sermons that they've given, and the backlash that they've received from their community, and yet they did not waver one bit in terms of what they feel is the gospel message.
Okay.
For racial equality. And it was a young pastor who has just got her church, I think, 2 weeks before the pandemic.
Wow.
And
okay, so
it was quite impressive just listening to her, Brenda.
Using the preached word and the worship experience as a way to share the importance of this issue. That's what I was trying to just kind of put a handle on. Thank you so much.
No, you're
Anybody
welcome.
else? I can't see names. I can see eyes. Barry Huff.
Thank you for your leadership on this issue. And I was inspired by the members of my group who are taking tangible steps, from anti-racism task forces in their dioceses to addressing the topic in newsletters to language translation and more to reach a wider diversity of audiences. And in this work, I've been inspired by something that Reverend Adam Taylor shared at the Ecumenical Advocacy Days a few years ago, when he commented that the message in Genesis 1, that we're all created as the image of God, is our foundation to heal racism and all the isms of this world. And so just that sense of awe and wonder in beholding each person as the image of God. And then the message in Galatians 3:26 through 28 of the baptismal formula of the early Jesus movement, that we are all one in God, and the challenge to discrimination and upholding and elevating of diversity and equity in that, I think, is such a strong biblical foundation for us to act on. So many thanks for your leadership on this vital ministry.
And those are the words, those are scripture foundations that can help keep us going, even when the going gets tough. And knowing that we're not the only ones that believe and embrace those words, even though our lived experience might have had us experience the words differently. But we get stronger voices when we're willing to keep preaching and teaching that. And when we're working with people who already know and trust us. Sometimes we can bring people along who were not hearing the Imago Dei, or seeing the Imago Dei. So thank you so much. And thank you for the passion with which you speak. Even in cyberspace, I'll touch you, my brother. All right. Anybody else?
Right back to you. Thank you.
God bless you. We'll take one more. Yes, I see your hand, but I don't
I
see
see
your name.
Pamela. Pamela, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, that's me. I was in a group of 4 and we represented ELCA, Christian Science, United Methodist, and Roman Catholic. And each of us shared things about public statements, positions parishes have taken, faith communities that have been very public with proclamations of steps they're taking to combat racism, active advocacy on behalf of people. And I shared that just this morning at 11 o'clock while morning prayer was starting, Roman Catholic Diocese of Charleston and the South Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities have filed a federal lawsuit to combat an amendment in the South Carolina Constitution, which has barred resources that in other states typically get to minority schools, religious schools. It's an amendment that goes back to the 1890s, but it's really been a contribution to what we've called the corridor of shame, which is the low quality education. We come like 49th out of 50th in standardized testing. And so a federal lawsuit to challenge this long-standing, more than 100-year amendment in the state constitution, which has really caused independent schools, the HBCUs, Catholic schools that were started with immigrant populations, other denomination schools from getting access to things that in other states are usually available, across the board to public and non-public schools. So.
Okay. And when we look at how the issues of race cut across all of our systems, we have learned some things, many of us, in this period of this COVID-19 pandemic era that has shown a light on things that people hadn't thought about being connected before. If we hadn't thought about the healthcare inequities, we see that glaringly now. Now, some of us have experienced it, but to experience these things as a community, as a world, it's a unique moment. But if we were told that COVID was over, it ended tomorrow, that nobody else had to worry about vaccines, that everything was good, if we were told that, we would still be back in a world, back in a space where the inequities from years back, from 400 plus years back, have not been addressed in our political context. And that sometimes is a hard space for Christians to really hone in on. I know when I worked for the National Council of Churches, probably the biggest controversy was, well, how much of this justice stuff should the church be in? And I was raised in a family where Jesus was represented not only as that loving God, not only as the person who would hold me in God's arms, but as that person who was going to fight battles for me, as that person who would turn over the table in the temple if the wrong things were happening. And so I've always seen in my lived experience Jesus says peace doesn't mean it's going to be quiet. It means working for what's right and in God's sight. And we can do that in so many different ways. So thank you all for sharing the different ways. And you know that everybody on here probably has a unique voice that he or she or they can contribute to this conversation. I just wanted to give you a few moments to reflect on what acting looks like, acting now looks like. Tura and I are going to have a little conversation, and she will be able to lift up questions that you all may have raised. I do want us to remember that this is a continuing education moment. And you may be doing great things in your own church and community that you want to share with others. You may, especially virtually, you can invite people from anywhere to sit in on your Bible study, to do that act now moment of education around HR 40 or HR 1, to learn why we have to add our voice as advocates on the legislative side. It's not just enough to talk about what's right. We've got to figure out how to change policies and systems to work in that direction as well. To say that we don't have brothers and sisters across denominations or across races, the devil is a lie. That's why we have the National Workshop on Christian. Did I say that? I did, didn't I? For those who I offended, I'm sorry. but we have each other. And so when you know folks that know folks, you can reach out and say, let's talk about this together. So I thank Tura again for this amazing opportunity to just share these few moments. And we're going to just talk about whatever you want to talk about for a few moments, Tura.
And I am so grateful that you are able to be here with us. It's amazing that you are in the homes of people all over the country right now. I am so grateful for that ability to do that. I do want to take a second to remind everyone that if you do have your Whova browser open, you can type into the chat. You can also type into the Q&A. So if you have any questions you want me to raise with Reverend Brenda, you can put them in that question box. And honestly, if you want to share some successes, if you want to put that in the chat side so that everybody can read it now and later, and if we have time, I'll read a couple of those too if I see them come in.
Wonderful.
So Reverend Brenda, you asked the question earlier, where do we go from here? Firstly, where is here? And where are we going?
And here for me today is still back in Minneapolis in May of last year. As much as I try not to think about George Floyd every day, I have not watched the CNN, I've not watched the trial at all. But in my life space, there are Black men and boys, my brothers, my nephews, my little great nephew, who now we're having to kind of work on because anybody that he sees with a gun, he overreacts. So this is very real. And to hear friends who have sons, and or when my husband's out after dark in the pandemic, I'm like, oh, where is he? Why isn't he home? And I'm like, this is crazy for you to be worried about that. But is it crazy? So my here has really been impacted so much by our criminal justice system, about our policing system, about our communities, how we define what it is to be human, and yet not wanting to pass on anger, but to look at a way, what good is going to come out of this? And when I hear the words that George Floyd's daughter said, her daddy was going to change the world, as hard as that sounded, out of troubled times, we know good things do happen. So my here right now is trying to work through, not lose the energy that has come from the moments of all of this shared pain, things that people saw together and are seeing over and over and over and over again in the media. When I read the comment, believe your eyes, then the thing the Spirit said to me was, and then move your feet, get busy, and stay busy to be a part of making a difference. So here for me now is in the heart of trying to help ease some of the pain, find a part that I can play to help educate people, to keep myself in a healthy space about racial justice, and know that we don't walk alone, that God calls us to take this journey with one another and be willing to step in those difficult but brave spaces to add our voices to the chorus.
Speaking of continuing to educate ourselves, do you have any specific favorite resources you want to point us to so that we can make sure
I knew you were going to ask me that. So these are my 3 most recent reads. Now, I would be telling a lie to say I read them all page for page. I did read almost every page of this. This is Bishop Curry's Love is the Way, because it takes the edge off a lot of the hard reading, because he keeps it so God-centered. This one is 400 Souls. And it's not a book that I could just read from cover to cover, but I just kind of flip through and read story after story. And it is a compilation of different authors who've written around different issues of related to race. Community history of African American from 1619 to 2019. So it's a great new resource. And then this one was harder for me to get into, Cast, but it is, some of us come from a more academic space. This helps. And I think that there's a book of resources, a list of resources. I think reading may also be on NCC's page. But one of the great ways of getting people into conversation is to take any tool like that and invite your congregation, your friends, your families, even if you don't read the whole book. Read the book jacket, read a couple of chapters, just to create some common space to have a conversation about something. I think Miss Avis I think she was raising her hand to say something.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I try to get the names down, but the book was so high I could not get the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put them in the chat. Okay.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Except that I don't see the chat on
Nope.
mine here.
That's all right.
Okay.
Oh, David Simmons is putting them in the chat.
Gotcha.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We already have some questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to go ahead and start
right
on
ahead.
that. Father Eric Rutten from Minneapolis asks, how can we as Christians act together for racial justice and peace in a way that moves us past political parties and past denominational differences?
I don't know that we can move past that in this era, because people are going to work with those where there's a comfort level. We tend to be motivated by people who we have some kind of shared connection to already. That's the beauty of the National Workshop on Christian Unity and the beauty on ecumenical partnerships and ecumenical advocacy days and NCC, because even though we may have our different expressions, we have some common goals. And we just agree to collaborate. We agree to disagree disagreeably. I mean, we agree to disagree agreeably. Okay, we can't talk about this or we can't talk about that, but we do agree that all people are created equal. We do agree that God is a God of justice and love, and find those things we do agree on and take a path to work together on those. I think for me, it's unrealistic to expect that we're going to get all of that fixed, because it wasn't fixed even in the Bible. That shouldn't stop us from finding those things that we can do together to be a voice for justice and change. That's the best answer I can give on that, and feel like I'm telling the truth.
Thank you for that. That's a good reminder. And I think you've got exactly the right folks here, the ecumenists who already want to reach across those aisles and already have those relationships, that we can exercise what we have already created to really
and
make
even
a
some of the
boom.
work that you and I've already done, and others that I recognize on the call, it is about building the bridge. And every stone, every piece of the bridge is not identical, but it all has to connect together to get us to where we're trying to go, give us a way to get across to where we're trying to go.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. A question about legislative initiatives. What else can we be looking at? Like you said earlier, religion and politics, we shouldn't talk about them. Well, we have to. Mm-hmm. So is there anything in particular you want to point us to make sure that we're looking at in our own locales?
So I got a list from Dr. Alexander today, and for sure the top one that they're asking us to pay attention to is HR 40. And I understand that by Friday of this week, it may be up for a vote. So this is aligning the National Council of Churches anti-racism campaign, Act Now to End Racism, with reparations, why we can't wait, looking at reparations as a justice matter, getting that bill on the floor, getting it voted on this week. And so if you can call your congressman, you can still do that. You can still email. That is issue number one. And if we just worked on that one, and they got the calls and the emails, we know that that does make a difference in getting votes out.
And I am actually going to put into the chat, I did find the National Council of Churches statement about HR 40. So that can be available for everybody, just so that you can go look at it and, and see all of the details there.
Great.
What about visibility? How do we work on making sure that we're seen in our communities, making sure that human affairs are visible in the communities, in our churches and in our greater communities as well?
If there are some good things that have come out of us being socially distanced, it is the awareness that we can be connected no matter where we are. And so the intentionality of reaching out and inviting people to work together with us, I think that's been enhanced. The importance of doing that and being intentional about doing it, making that commitment to work outside the walls of the church. I mean, because there really are no walls if you've got any technology at all. And the intentionality is the word that for me moves me the most. We let some things happen. It's kind of afterthought. Oh, we got a meeting. Oh, we should invite so-and-so and so-and-so. But what about every time we sit down, we think about broadening that table and really looking at what it means to include people. Not just invite them after everything's been set up, but to include them in helping you shape something that could make a difference. And starting close to home. Starting with people who know and respect you, or who you want to know and respect you, because sometimes we set our goals so high, our expectations so high, that we miss being able to make some even small gains. And every step matters. It doesn't have to be big and fancy. It does have to help us connect our heads and our hearts to why this change is important. I had a confession to make that I have godchildren who are the mother's white, the dad's black. They are in their 30s now. And just since I've been doing this racial justice work the last 3 years, I realized I'd never had a conversation with my godchildren about race. And so we started having these conversations. I found out that their mom and dad never had conversations with them about race, because it's just their family. It didn't feel like it was something they needed to do. And now in this George Floyd climate, he said, oh my gosh, the kids don't even understand what's happening, because now my godchildren now have children of their own. And so there was no harm intended. You know, I'm not making anybody bad, but we hadn't talked about it. And I hadn't talked about it in my own family in a way that says, how do we address these issues as hard as they are? And how do we help our children not be afraid, or help ourselves not be angry? Help ourselves see ourselves as agents. We do have some agency we don't have to go back and put our heads down in the sand like an ostrich. It's not going away if we do that. That it is hard work. And so as radical about this as I think I am, well, girl, you haven't even done your work in your own family, so how can you be upset with anybody else? So that, and I'm not really trying to be funny about it. Sometimes people think it's just so big they can't do anything, and there's a place to start. There is a place to start. And when we get ourselves some shared language, we get some tools that we can use, we can make a difference. We really, each one of us can.
Absolutely. We have another question.
Okay.
From Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan. He would like some examples. Give us an idea of how anti-racism stances impact power sharing, decision making, and resource development in denominational, ecumenical, congregational settings, etc.
That sounds like a corporate question. And I would answer it like I would answer it in a corporate setting. That we ask our church leadership to have a racial equity lens. And I say a race and gender lens because in my predominantly Black congregation, we still have some issues around whether women can do everything. But have a racial equity lens on all of your church policies, your denominational policies. Do the internal audits just like you would want the corporations to do. If everybody on your board is white and male, or Black and male, or white and female, if all of those things, if we're really talking about creating a more just and open and welcoming society as believers, then even in the church, we have to look at who's leading us and who's in the pipeline for leadership. One of the denominational groups I work with, if you go just through the pipeline, there's nobody in the pipeline that's going to make this a diverse organization in the next 14 years. And so then we talk about, well, what are affirmative steps that we can take? Well, some of those rules are so old, you just need to throw out the rules and create some new rules. And so very serious when I say just doing that analytical look at the policies and procedures that even our churches and ecumenical bodies have in place. I hope that answers the question some, Dr. Sullivan.
I recently was listening to, I don't even remember who, giving some sort of sermon and talked about sometimes it's not about inviting someone to the table, it's about inviting someone and building a new table together. And I think you just touched on that in a couple different angles. And thank you for that. Hot off the presses, one just popped up, giving the shifting religious landscape and the changed role of churches in the civil rights movement. Who are the most critical partners? And that question is from Catherine Laurie of the ELCA.
Who are the most critical partners? And knowing who that question came from, I'm going to say this. Catherine, you're one of the most critical partners. The ELCA, the United Methodist Church, are really historic white congregations that are willing to do as yours is doing to make public stands for racial justice and to be willing to hold arms and shoulders and rub shoulders with the churches that may not have the same economic ability even to get engaged. So certainly partnering with our historic Black churches and churches of color is important, but getting other white churches to talk together. And I don't intend any disrespect when I say white church, but you all know what I mean, I hope, in this context. To be willing to be on the front lines. Because people of color get tired, whether we say it or not, we get tired of having to be the ones that plead our own case all of the time. So if you understand the case, then doing as some of our denominations are doing, trying to learn what it means to be a real ally, to really take some of the heat up front, walk not just with us and beside us, but sometimes be willing to be the shield and build those strong relationships that we know we're really in it together. It's not just for show. It's a long-term integrated relationship. So the strongest partners are those that you're willing to invest in and get close to and stay with for the long haul. Do like family, fall out and get back together again. Argue if you have to, but get back up and still do the work that God has assigned our hands together of showing what it really means to love God and neighbor and redefine what we mean by neighbor and be true to that.
And that actually gave me a segue. I know there's probably another question in the chat, but I wanted to ask from our white churches, what are some steps? Are there trainings or anything like that coming up that we can start to look for? Any ways that we can know the case better so that we can feel like we're empowered to be that ally?
Well, I've been talking to folk who said, well, I want to be beyond racism 101. I'm tired of the awareness stuff. It's just sounding repetitious. And I say with bated breath, where do you want to go? So recently we've decided through Grace and Race Ministries, which is the nonprofit that I'm the chair of, that we would host conversations on white privilege. And lo and behold, discover that John Dorhauer has a curriculum that he prepared in 2012. And now it was updated in 2016 with a facilitator's guide. So John Dorhauer and Grace and Race Ministries are going to host a conversation on April 28th. Beyond the Basics. Let's talk about white privilege. And just begin not to be offended by that language, but to understand what it means. And we're not talking privilege in a cutesy way. We're talking about things that are inherent. And once we recognize them, then we know how to become better allies. If you're one of the guys that speaks with me very often says, I never had to prove my identity to anybody just showing up in a space. I've never had to really list all of my degrees and my credentials to be welcomed into a space. And yet I was offended when I did one of the exercises, he said, that made it look like I thought I was better than everybody because I grew up economically disadvantaged. And then I realized white privilege wasn't about the economics in the pure sense. And I've been able to be a better ally because I understand that now. I put my guard down, let my guard down, and began to study and understand how I benefited just from the color of my skin. Those are hard conversations sometimes, and it's not us against them. It's us trying to help us do better as people who say that we're united because we know we were all created in the image of God. If we say that and believe it, then as one of the gentlemen said, that could be the one verse. We don't even have to go to Galatians and or Ephesians. We don't have to go anywhere else. We just go to that one verse. And that gives us cause to walk together in this battle. So join us on April 28th and hear John. And if you're excited about it, then there's going to be a 5-part series after that as we learn together how to deal with the issue of white privilege, how it impacts systems, and what our churches can do. And there'll be examples of what many of the UCC churches are already doing as they do a deeper dive into this work. So thank you for allowing me to make that commercial.
You're welcome.
Join us.
So I just put the Grace and Race Ministries website in the chat, so that you should be able to watch there for the updates and sign up for the newsletter. We've got one more question that I would love to get to before we get out of here, and it's from Hubert Ivory on the West Coast.
Okay.
What can we do to help churches connect their faith and beliefs about the worth and dignity of all people to social action around racism in their community?
Just do the work. Find an issue that you believe enough in and do the work. Don't feel like you have to do it all. If you say, well, HR 40 doesn't float my boat, then find one of the ecumenical advocacy days issues. If climate change is something that being on the West Coast, since you said that might be something that gets you excited. Then work on that issue. If that doesn't work for you, there may be something in your community around the schools, something around a youth center. Just find an issue that moves your heart and get believers to work with you on it and just build those relationships. And when you start to do work around things you care about, it not only helps you grow a team that's going to be with you, and you don't have to do it all, you don't have to know it all, but you're part of something that's bigger than you are for a cause that gives God honor and glory. And I think all that we strive to do as believers is that in the end, we've done the work that we feel like God has assigned to our hands. My grandmother would say to us all the time, many of you probably heard me say it because I say it a lot, I'm only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, I will do. And when I look at it like that, then I'm not so overwhelmed by the vastness of the issues. But I'm going to bloom where I'm planted, do my part, invite people to do it with me, and hope people will invite me to do work with them, just as we're doing here. And we draw stronger connections with each other and make a difference for all of humankind. So thank you for an opportunity to talk with you a little bit this afternoon. I celebrate what the National Workshop is doing and continues to do to help break down barriers and build bridges. We know that God is in the midst of it all. Be blessed.
Thank you so very much, Pastor Brenda. We really appreciate your presence here today, and all of you are getting all kinds of clapping hands and hearts and things in the gallery view if you can't see it. And I'll remind everybody that the chat will stay there. So if you missed any of those links, you can go scroll and find them. And again, you can find Reverend Brenda's bio underneath the video and that quick list of links of anti-racism resources in a PDF form is there to click on as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. We've got our closing prayer is in a half an hour, and then hopefully we will all be able to take a break from our computers after that. So thank you again, Pastor Brenda, and we'll see the rest of you in a few minutes.
Travel safe in Zoom land.